This is your foundation. How to successfully grow your wedding business. Weddings Made Simple.
Okay, now let's do one more clip here in Resolve before we jump over to Final Cut. So I'm going to turn this off. So we have our, can view it in log, and we'll do a color space transform effect, this time for our gamma and color space correction. So let's set up our node tree. 8 nodes. We have our highlight recovery. We have our gamma correction. We'll just call this color space transform. Balance, saturation, exposure, HSL. What we're going to do here, instead of using a film print emulation, we're just going to create our own look. And lastly, we have our global adjustment. Okay, so let's go ahead and knock this out. Remember, first order of business, let's do our gamma correction. So I'm just going to open up my color space transform, drop that on here. This was shot on a red in Dragon Color. The gamma was red log film, and we'll be good to go. Okay, so next order of business is exposure. We just want to make sure we can see our shot really well. Let's open up our scopes. Okay. Let's give this a little bit more exposure here. Watching our scopes. Already kind of gauging where our balance is also while we do this. Okay. Let's give a little bit more pop there, a little bit more contrast. Okay, next we want to do our highlight recovery. In this case, we don't really have anything to do here. We can see everything is staying within our range. This area here is just from the brightly saturated yellow greens that we're getting, as we can see here. So we don't need to worry about that blue as much. So now we go to our balance. And when you have a raw clip, it's best to correct your balance with your raw settings. This is about as accurate as if you're changing it on the camera itself on the day of shooting. And that's one of the beauties of shooting in RAW. Okay, so we're going to be watching the white of her dress here, and we're also going to be watching the skin tones. We can see that we have a little bit of a greener sort of skin tone here, and that's just going to be because of the environment that she's in. We have this really yellow bridge on this sunny day, as well as probably a lot of this green trees that are around her. So we will want to keep that in mind. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish this out. Watching my waveforms right about here. Okay, so now her dress is a little bit white. In this case, it doesn't necessarily have to be exceptionally white. Just remember that the environment that she's in, it's in a bright, sunny day. So it may be a little bit warmer than usual, but so maybe we can control that just a little bit. But overall, that's looking pretty good. So from there, we'll jump into our saturation, just add a little bit. That should be good. So now let's go ahead and do our look. So for this, in this instance, we're going to add a little bit of split toning in our look node here. So split toning is essentially if you take one part of your shot and you push, say, the shadows or the midtones or the highlights, and you push a different color into that. So in this case, let's do a little bit of cyan into our shadow region, into our lift. We'll just be subtle here. And often the split toning is just really good for color separation. So we'll offset that a little bit. We'll add a little bit of orange into the gamma, Maybe a little bit of orange into the gain as well. Remember, it's a bright, sunny day, so it's nice to have a little bit of that warm feel. Offset that a little bit more in the shadows. The gain. Let's do before and after. Before, after. I think that's really helping out a lot. In fact, I might just push it a little bit farther. This is going to be kind of up to preference for you. But I mean, I think that makes a huge difference. We're getting a lot more color separation between the oranges and the skin tones, as well as we're getting a lot of great, a nice bluish color into the greens. It kind of takes that yellow sting off of all the greens. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like you don't really realize how much you need it until you add it. Now, if that's a little too extreme for you, you can dial it back if you want, but I'm going to go ahead and stick with this. Another part of this look that I'm going to include will fall into my HSL node here, my hue, saturation, luminance curves. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add a little bit of an S curve to it, which will give it a little bit more of a film look, if you will. We'll just be subtle with that. Let's check our scopes. Okay, and that helps with giving us a little bit more of a pop. So let's maybe boost that up just a little bit more. And it looks like we might be getting close a little up here at the top. So we'll go into our highlight recovery node and we'll just take our gain, just to pull it down ever so slightly. If you want that to be a little bit more controlled, you can either use your highlights or you could go into your HDR palette and use that as well. Okay, and so from there, we'll go ahead and just fix any white and black points. Again, I don't think we need to be completely neutral here because we do want it to be a little bit warm, which we have it being a little bit warm because it is a bright and sunny day and we have kind of a warm environment, so that would be natural. So we can control it a little bit, we can pull the blue back a little bit, but we don't have to take it all the way. And then the same thing for our shadows. We can push. And I'm using the log wheels here because they affect just the more specified regions of the shadows, midtones, and the highlights than the primaries wheels do. So we'll just push a little bit more red into the shadows there. But we don't want to offset our look too much, so we'll just do it a little bit. And we'll go back into our highlight recovery and just pull that up a little bit and go back into our curve. Pop that down. All right, there we go. Let's look at before and after. There's before, there's after. It's kind of hard to see it with that color space transform in there, so we'll just select this. So before, after. So one more little thing to do on this is just to make sure we have our skin looking good in the right spot. So we're going to create a layer node here. And we're just going to qualify the skin tone really fast. And don't worry, it looks like all the adjustments went away, but that's just because of our layer node. Once we qualify it, we'll get it back. Shift H to go to highlight mode. We'll qualify our skin. We'll see it looks like most of it's kind of leaning in this, in the green, on the yellow-green side of the scale. So we can just open that up a little bit, make sure we get what we need. We'll control this. And I'm not going to be perfect here. I'm just going to do a quick denoise and a blur. Pop that out. And we'll just add a quick little adjustment here to the skin tone just to make sure we're getting it on that skin tone line or close to it. Remember, they are standing in a bright, sunny day, so it might be a little warmer, but we can just help cheat it a little bit just to get a little bit more in that ballpark. Remember, we want to focus solely on her. He's just a little bit more red in skin tone than she is, so we do want to focus more on the bride and then maybe offset that just a little bit for those more magenta areas. It's looking good. We do before, after, before, after. Now if we want to just kind of blend that in, we can do that. We'll go to our node key and just drop the gain a little bit so it looks a little bit more natural. Again, notice the importance of our stacking here. Remember, we want to start with our anchor references. That's going to be our highlight and shadow recovery, and that's going to be our balance right here at the beginning in our log state where we have as much raw color information as possible. And then once we do that, we can move into our regular adjustments like our exposure and our balance and our saturation before we get to our more destructive adjustments like we did in our look, our skin qualification, and our HSL curves.